So, we've got a very brief agenda today. It is to organize the committee through the passing of committee rules and also to elect a chairperson and vice chairperson. And then we have our legislative analyst here, Mac Taylor, who's going to give us a little overview of what the committee does. It is a bit of an obscure committee. Joint Legislative Budget Committee is often confused with the Joint Legislative Budget Conference Committee, which of course is meeting concurrent to this hearing today. And so for those who are new to the committee, and I believe, and you may be attending your first committee hearing today, but have served in past years. I'm one of those, as this committee does not often meet, and you'll come to understand why that is the case and also what the committee actually does very shortly. So again, before we can actually call our quorum, want to point out that the committee's primary function is to review proposed actions regarding the expenditure of funds once the budget is enacted. So upwards as many as 300 issues or more can arise in a year's time that will arrive for our consideration. But because they need immediate action, clearly it would be impractical for us to meet because this work goes on even when we are out of session. So it is very staff-driven, though always with the full direction of the committee chairperson. Traditionally, going back over decades, the Senate Budget Committee chair has chaired this committee, and the Assembly Budget Committee chair has vice chaired this committee. Assemblyman Chesbro, when he chaired the Senate Budget Committee in the Senate, chaired this Joint Legislative Budget Committee in the past. So we've got some history here and some expertise and experience, and I think that should give us additional confidence. So what else can we do until we get our quorum formed? You know, as opposed to keep you, Mr. Taylor, at all waiting for us as we form our quorum, why don't we jump right into not only the workings of the committee, but also how the Legislative Analyst's Office also advises us as these questions come in from the administration that we need to advise them. You advise and make analysis of their requests to help inform us in our decision making.
Yes, I'd be happy to. And Mr. Chairman, I don't need to take long, but I think it would be helpful just to give a little historical context and the role of the committee.
And before we lose our quorum, I've learned that it's always good to establish this. So if you could please call the roll.
Leno.
Here.
DeSaulnay. Emerson.
Here.
Huff.
Here.
Kehoe.
Here.
Padilla.
Here.
Walters.
Here.
Wolk.
Here.
Blumenfield.
Present.
Berryhill.
Here.
Brownlee.
Here.
Chesbro.
Here.
Fuentes.
Present.
Harkey. Mitchell. Nielsen.
So we do have our quorum established.
Yes, we do.
Welcome, Mr. Taylor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members. In the booklet that you have that Jody prepared for all of you, in the last tab, it's called Notification to JLBC. If you flip to that last tab, I just want to go over very briefly the kind of role that the committee plays in these various notification letters that the chair mentioned. As he said, we get as many as 300 a year. And most of them are fairly technical. The vast majority of them are non-controversial. But I think it's important to understand what they represent. The legislature, in effect, has given limited delegation of authority to the administration during the budget year, so that after the budget passes, things come up. You might get new federal funds that come in that we hadn't imagined, and we didn't plug them into the budget. So as you see on that chart there, in the middle of the page, we have Section 28. That's a very common one. And what that means is that when those federal funds come in, they have appropriation authority in your annual budget act, but the departments that want to spend them need expenditure authority. And so they will ask for that, and you have in effect delegated to the administration the ability to spend those funds, but they need to contact you if they're over some threshold amounts. So that's what I mean by a very limited delegation of authority. Because your primary role under the Constitution is appropriating funds, and that is a legislative responsibility. And so you want to be very careful about delegating to the administration authority that they should not have. So we've set this up to take into account things that pop up after the budget has been enacted. And as I said, 28 is the most common one, I think. You get new federal funds come in. A letter will go out not only to the JLBC, to my office, but to all of the appropriations and the Budget Committee staff. So while the LEO has traditionally taken a kind of a lead role in reviewing them, all of your staffs get those letters too and will often raise issues. And I think that's very important, that everyone has access to raise issues to the chair if they have concerns over an issue. What we look for is various things to make sure that the administration is spending those monies according to your intent. That's the first thing we want to do. Are they violating your intent? Are they consistent with the way that you spent other monies that you budgeted? So, for example, if some federal funds came in and it just augmented a program that you had provided funds for, the monies go out fairly routinely, they're for prescribed purposes, you don't have a lot of control over them, we probably wouldn't raise an issue, and most likely your staffs would not either. Let's take another situation, though. Money comes in from the federal government, it was unexpected, and it can be used for any purpose whatsoever, and it doesn't have to be spent within that year. What we would probably advise you is, we're very happy the Fed sent us the money. You don't need to spend these right now. Take them into account during your next budget process where you can decide, not the administration, on how those monies should be spent. That they don't commit them to a program, it might be a very worthwhile program. You might have a better purpose for them. So we really try to do two things when we look at them. We try to make sure that the expenditure of the funds, the authority that you're given to the administration is consistent with what you intend. And secondly, we try to maximize your flexibility. If there have been problems with section letters in the past, I think it's been that the administration has sometimes, or departments, I don't want to say the administration, in many cases departments have gamed you. They've hung on to notification of federal funds until the budget was passed because the review process is much shorter. If you go through the budget process, you have subcommittee hearings, you have full committee hearings, people have a chance to think about how they might want to spend the funds. If it comes in after the year has started, you have 30 days to make a decision. And it's been very awkward, in my view, when the administration or departments will take months and months to consider how they would spend monies, and then they give you 20 or 30 days. And if you try to raise questions about it, they get all kind of uppity on us of, well, we're holding back the expenditure of the funds. That's not the way it should work. In fact, we put in language recently in Section 28 and in other sections that says this is not intended as an alternative budget process. So what we try to do is raise concern if the monies should have been considered in the prior budget process. And a couple of 3 years ago, we had a situation where we pressed the administration to get a lot of these proposals into the budget process. So we either try to push them back into the prior budget process, or we will try to push them forward into the next one so that you can take your time to make decisions about these monies. So those are the main things that we look for. Clearly, your staff can look at these proposals on whatever other concerns they have. There may be a local issue, it may be an historical issue, whatever. But I think it is important that all the staffs do see the letters. As you can see from the types of the notification letters in Figure 1, they range from things that we call control sections, which are just language in the back of the book, the back of the Annual Budget Act, to things that are in statute. And as you see at the bottom part of the chart, there's a lot of capital outlay related items and notifications that you get. These would be, for example, a project that you have already approved, but it turns out it's costing more than they thought, and it can't cost more than 20% or really the project is dead. So oftentimes you'll get agencies that will try to work around that in ways that we don't think are appropriate. So again, we're always just trying to preserve your flexibility to make sure that these notification letters are in keeping with what you either intend or to maximize your flexibility. I think with that, I'm happy to answer any questions, Mr. Chairman, but again, that is the main role. These letters come in. The chair has a particular responsibility, as Mr. Chesbro knows well, in taking comments from all of the members. Jody plays a key role in working with members and staff, does a great job in trying to make sure that everyone's heard and working out compromises and hearing the issues. And we, of course, are here to help in whatever way we can.
That's a great introduction. Thank you, Mr. Taylor. And committee members, for those of you who do not know our consultant, that would be Ms. Jody Martin, who is here, and is the one who facilitates all of the letters to which Mr. Taylor's already made reference. And if his presentation did not suggest to you the importance of the operations of this committee, keep in mind that in addition to all of that, we also appoint the legislative analyst. So I think that not only have we done a good job in our most recent deliberations, but clearly a very important role that this committee plays. One of our more experienced members on the JLBC, Mr. Nielsen, I think you have a comment.
Mr. Taylor, would another example be the issue that we've talked about and I've raised, whereby on our side I was going to be resistant of these deficiencies that come in from such entities as corrections. They overspend and then come back every year, and routinely we just approved them. Well, a little over a year ago I said we're not going to do that anymore. We're going to be more discerning and push back. Well, then the issue came to bear of taking $100 million, Department of Mental Health and Department of Corrections both did this, redirected dollars approved by the legislature and the governor in the budget, and redirected it for other purposes, in corrections case to pay overtime and accrued annual leave. That's $100 million. And the claims board just, okay, we had no say in that. I think that's very wrong, and we need to have remedy. Is that another example?
Absolutely. In fact, I think we wrote a letter on that particular issue. I'm glad you raised the deficiency process. We used to have what we call deficiencies, where departments would come in and say, they were supposed to say, we're spending at a rate which would result in deficiency. We want the authority to do that. So, and in other words, we don't want to come in after the fact, after we've made commitments beyond what you've appropriated. It never worked very well. We tried to switch it to a process where you're supposed to come in and actually ask for a supplemental appropriation. We don't really have deficiencies per se. If you need more money, you're supposed to come in and get it during the year. It hasn't worked out very well. And so I don't know what to advise you at this stage other than we just need to keep holding departments responsible. And I think the legislature does have a strong role when you do your budgets to try to make sure that the budgets are reasonable also, that the departments can realistically spend and that they have the monies they need to do what you want them to do. But the problem you raise still exists, and I don't know exactly how we should address it.
On that point, I'm raising a legal issue. I think there's a legal problem with that, and I've asked the Auditor General to look into it. I've asked the Joint Legislative Audit Committee to do an audit of this. I expect this, if these two agencies are onto it, I'm sure others are coming. And we really need to look into it. So I've requested of the Joint Legislative Audit Committee to take a look at it. The Auditor General, Elaine Howell, and I've discussed it as well. And I want to see what legal authority they have or do not have to do this. But this is one thing that really needs to be cranked down as well.
Mr. Nielsen, I support you wholly in your efforts. It is a serious problem. And I have an ancillary issue to that, also related to the Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation. You may correct me on some of my details, but I believe a handful of years ago, the legislature gave authority to the Department of Corrections through the issuance of lease revenue bonds to spend some hundreds of millions of dollars plus all of the debt service, which totals to over $1 billion, impacting our general fund upwards of $30 million annually to pay cost of the debt on these lease revenue bonds to rebuild the death row at San Quentin. Well, we're in a very different economic situation right now than we were when we gave them that authority. These dollars are outside of AB 900 because it's an independent project, came before AB 900. And in light of the huge deficiencies the department's bringing to us, who are they to think that they've got an extra $30 million of general fund money to throw out the window on a $1 billion project, which, dependent upon a legal question, could bring us to capacity of this new $1 billion project within just a couple more years? Do we have to revisit that statutorily, or is there something that this committee or the Budget Committee can be doing?
Oh, I think clearly it's something the Budget Committee could deal with. This committee, too. I mean, the nice thing...
Actually, we have put, the Senate has put some...
you put some
budget
language
bill language in, yes. But how about this committee?
Well, this committee could always do something too. You could meet and sponsor a bill, or the nice thing about this committee is you have all the fiscal chairs here and vice chairs.
Yes.
So whatever way that you want to go, whether you did it through the budget committee, this is the time during the budget. If you wanted to put a halt to it, you need to probably pass a statute. Now, it's interesting because San Quentin came up as a notification letter many years ago, where they were doing exactly what I mentioned. Their costs were way over the 20% limit. So what they did is they changed the scope of the project. They were going to say we're going to build 3/4 of what they had originally provided. And by saying we're going to build 3/4, they could stay within the 20% cost overrun.
Was this the death chamber itself?
No. This is the whole facility, the new death row outside. Mm-hmm. Now, the committee decided to go along at that time. But there's an example where they did have to report. You had a chance at least to air. We had a chance to air our issues, and the committee was able to decide. At this point, though, I think you would have to do something in statute because you have given them the authority to issue those bonds. The contract is ready to be awarded, it's my understanding. They've put it off for another 30 days. But I suppose there is still something you could do to stop it if you wanted to.
Very good. Any other questions of Mr. Taylor before we get on to our committee business? If not, we thank you very much, Mr. Taylor.
Thank you.
Yeah. So I hope the purpose of the committee is a little bit clearer for those who are new to it. And the next order of our business then would be to adopt the committee rules. They were last adopted in February of 2007. The only change that we're considering today from those rules approved in 2007 is a rule regarding public access to legislative records of the committee. So we have a motion by Assemblyman Chesbro, and I don't even know if we need a second.
Do we need a second? Here?
But we have a second. We'll take it. Thank you, Assemblyman Chesbro, and we'll call the roll.
Leno,
Aye.
DeSaulnay, Emerson,
Aye.
Huff,
Aye.
Kehoe,
Aye.
Padilla,
Aye.
Walters,
Aye.
Wolk,
Aye.
Blumenfield,
Aye.
Berryhill, Brownlee, Chesbro, Fuentes, Harkey, Mitchell, Nielsen. And 5 each side.
Thank you. So the committee rules are adopted.
Mr. Chair, I'd be glad to move the election of Senator Leno as chair and Assemblymember Blumenfield as vice chair,
Thank you, Senator Wolk.
if you want it.
Assemblyman Nielsen seconds that. Any questions, debate, concerns, bucking of tradition? We'll call the roll.
Leno,
Aye.
DeSaulnay, Emerson,
Aye.
Huff, Kehoe, Padilla, Walters, Wolk, Blumenfield,
Aye.
Berryhill, Brownlee, Chesbro,
Aye.
Fuentes,
Aye.
Harkey, Mitchell, Nielsen.
Aye.
Thank you, Assemblyman Blumenfield. Congratulations on your vice chairmanship.
Congratulations to you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. And as will always be the last order of our business, we would open this up for public comment. Seeing none, we stand adjourned. Thank you all.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.